reviewing something in bad faith. This was something mentioned a lot towards the end of my previous Nostalgia Critic response video because I think this is the death knell of the comedy excuse a lot of channel awesome defenders like to use. Once upon a time, I may have been able to buy a lot of the older reviews as an overly exaggerated rant about how something you would have enjoyed as a kid just doesn't hold up well when you revisit it as an adult and, as such, agreed it was pure comedy. But as time went on and events unfolded, I just can't say it's the same. It's easy to dismiss some random bad movie aimed at kids you never heard about and make fun of it because you can tell there was no soul in it. But making this your entire shtick and playing it for so long really begins to mess with your ability to take a good look at something good or bad and even its development history. After all, when your tool of choice is a hammer and that's all you put in your arsenal, seeing everything as a nail just comes with the territory. Let me put it like this. When someone like Mr. One-Ups makes a review of Sonic Underground, a show that I had history with and still unironically enjoy, that's geared so much in comedy and at no point demands being taken seriously, I can accept it as such. The jokes about all the flaws and oversights crank it up to 11 and set my sides into orbit, but you'd have to be a young child or a special kind of dense to think he was in any way being serious. And the reviews by other YouTubers that are supposed to be serious dives fulfill the informative purposes as they should by giving sound overviews, critiques, and arguments defended with evidence as to why one would or wouldn't want to watch it. That's not something I get from Nostalgia Critic anymore, if it was even there in the first place. And the reason why people harp on Doug Walker this hard in that field is that he's become the face of internet movie reviews for better or for worse. He's been appointed as some kind of authority, and to the outsider, it's hard not to take his word on something as gospel, and it leads to that being their only input and colors review on a thing a certain way. I should know this because until I watched Sailor Moon for myself and saw Misanthropony's rebuttal of that episode of NC, I took Doug's word at face value and initially set out to make my own series Comets Light like Sailor Moon, but correcting all the supposed problems with it. And be honest, how many people do you know that watched a Nostalgia Critic episode on something that they really liked, but completely adopted the opposite thoughts after watching the review? This is what I meant by bad faith being rampant in Doug's content, and since he's learned nothing from the Change the Channel controversy and hasn't done anything to improve his craft, it's unfortunately not going to stop. And that brings us around nicely to when the first red flag came up for me. Premiering on July 21st, 2015, and an oldie but a goodie for some, the Osmosis Jones review is a special kind of awful. This was the first review I actually disliked. Not because the film in question is something I find absolutely perfect. Hell no, it's got more frayed edges than John Bon Jovi's closet. It's because the observations he made are so confounding and nonsensical that it's actually kind of impressive. This is the kind of review that I can definitely sink my critical claws into with how much he gets wrong and misinformation galore. You all saw the title, so get out your Guide to the Human Body and Psychology 101 textbooks and strap in. It starts with the typical opening interlude, and not even 2 minutes in, we run into the biggest problem with the review as a whole.
Let's talk about an animated film that shows what goes on inside of you. A movie that shows that the tiny things that happen on the outside are actually big things on the inside. The colorful, strange, comedic adventure simply known as Inside Out. And we're gonna talk about how great it is here today.
Alright, Troop, he loved the movie.
But he said it was like Herman's head.
Oh, please, no one even remembers that.
I miss the other white wall.
Besides, even if this idea's been done before, no pinhead's ever done it in the way that we've done it before.
Oh yeah, nobody's ever done it like this before. Yeah, a job you all stole from me, Osmosis Jones.
Wait, you're saying we ripped you off?
If the body-related pun fits.
Hey, we're one of the most brilliantly written films of all time, and you're just a Farley Brothers movie.
Yeah, that's right. You ripped off the people that made Jim Carrey a male cougar.
Hey, why don't we let the critic decide by having him review the movie instead?
Whatever we do, we better do it fast. The critic's just been sitting there brain dead for a few minutes.
Oh!
That's why we're gonna review Osmosis Jones. Why am I suddenly in a bad mood?
Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about apples to oranges comparisons. I know Doug isn't the only one to make the Osmosis Jones and Inside Out comparison. In fact, a lot of people brought the movie back out of their memory thanks to Inside Out's announcement. What bugs me more than it should, though, at the risk of me coming across as a trilby-wearing know-it-all in a YouTube comment section, is that it's an inaccurate comparison. Osmosis Jones primarily deals in physical health and human anatomy with a buddy cop story, while Inside Out is geared in psychology with a road trip and growing up adventure. That may take place inside the human body, but here's where apples to oranges comes in. For all two of you out there who are confused by what I mean, I'm not talking about delicious fruit sold in any grocery store or farmer's market. The apples to oranges comparison is a logical fallacy where someone takes two fundamentally and objectively different things and makes the claim of similarity or equivalence. Osmosis Jones and Inside Out are both films that take place entirely or primarily within the human body, but that's where the similarities end. The former is about physical health, while the latter is limited to mental health. And in a similar vein, anatomy and physiology are different from psychology. They can overlap when it comes to psychiatry, where the practitioner has to have an understanding of the brain's physical build and chemical process to understand the inner workings of mental illnesses and disorders in order to properly diagnose the patient and assess the correct prescriptions by specific medication and dosage to fix the chemical imbalances causing the issue. The comparison also falls apart when you consider the approach each film had to take to properly get their world building across. When Osmosis Jones portrays an organ system, germ, cell, or other piece of human anatomy as a location, occupation, or set piece in the story, it's designed with a certain analogy to better explain what that thing does. For example, your immune system is portrayed as law enforcement. White blood cells go after and attack any germs that could cause illness. In a similar way, police officers pursue and neutralize criminals. The nervous system is portrayed as a series of power lines, transferring electrical signals from the brain to muscles on a large scale, just as electricity would flow through transformers and power lines in a power grid. Physical health and anatomy are also easier to give analogies for, while psychological aspects require more abstract analogies to get across. In psychology, you're looking at how people think, and the average person would not understand the exact programming that goes on through the neurons and gray matter, or physical examples to draw a likeness to on that front. That's where you get imaginings to make the concepts easier to picture. Long-term memory is easier to understand when you illustrate it as a giant library of thoughts that documentation of during the day, and short-term gets sent to after a while. The control panel getting more complex as Riley grows up matches the evolution of how a child thinks throughout the different stages of development. Or if you'll let me use an example from Pokemon to better sum up what I'm trying to get across, moves being categorized as physical or special even if they come from a same type, such as grass. Vine Whip is a grass-type move that is categorized as physical because the Pokemon using it, such as Bulbasaur, is using physical parts of its body to carry out the action that can be seen plainly. Leaf Storm and Leaf Tornado are grass-type moves that are categorized as special because you have to come up with a more abstract way to explain how the Pokemon is conjuring what could possibly be described as magic rooted in mana and their instinctual aspects. I had to cover this right out the starting gate because while it's not the only problem with this review, it's a big problem with the review. Doug gives a couple more opening statements and...
It's the prequel to Inside Out. Ow!
Sorry to stop the flow again, but let me correct the record on this. Fun fact, I actually planned on reviewing both films in a project called Non-Comparison, completely detached from this episode back when it was fresh on the web. It got shelved indefinitely, but while researching Inside Out's development history for the review, I was able to find that the idea for it was conceptualized by an actual psychologist, and that's why a lot of the film's set pieces are laid out the way they were. Nowhere in the development was Osmosis Jones mentioned even once, so I am going to have to preemptively and politely ask Doug to blow it out his ear. Back on track though. He starts commenting on the start of the movie with several jokes about what's happening. You know, something different for a change.
Sarcasm self-test complete.
Murray plays Frank, a zookeeper with a daughter who acts a lot more like his mother because, again, let me just take a guess here.
Your mother, God bless her soul.
You know, should we just line up all the mothers in animated films to the electric chair? Is there just a cinematic courtroom somewhere where they're just like,
what are you charged with?
giving the birth of life?
Kill her!
Good.
Okay, first off, Doug cannot do good impressions. He just can't. Second, despite how common of a trope the dead parent is, Walt Disney was not the first one to implement it. In fact, the reason why a lot of parents in Disney films are absent, typically due to death, even if it wasn't a key point in the source material they may have been adapted from, is because of a tragic bit of Walt's history. After Snow White became a success, Walt was able to purchase a new home for his parents, but it was unfortunately found later that the heating system was faulty. As a result, his mother tragically passed away by carbon monoxide poisoning, and Walt has felt guilty about it ever since. Like it was his fault that he put her in that situation. And implying that killing off parents in animation and children's media at large is all some Palpatine-level scheme, knowing this just makes the joke come across in really poor taste. Shane's mother being absent is something I'll save for later, but I don't think the bar can get any lower.
But a monkey steals his egg, which means for some reason now he has to choke him.
Now I gotta choke you.
What can I even say to this right now? Bill Murray is choking / possibly dry humping a monkey. I never thought I'd have to repeat this from my Planet of the Apes review, but don't do it. Why is that such a common theme around here?
Oh my fucking— I was joking! You edited this on purpose, you absolute Luddite! I am not defending the idiocy of this scene by any means, but this is a deliberate edit that recaps the scene disgustingly untruthfully. Between this, Sailor Moon, and the Sonic OVA, I want to ask very seriously, do you have some kind of hang-up about sex, Doug? I legitimately want to know, because at least once an episode, you are talking mad horny for someone in bonk distance. I didn't intend to get this mad this early into an episode, but what in Black Doom's ballsack made him think this was okay? Now, I know joking about events in the movie are par for the course in the show, but they have a special kind of problem here. The opening interlude pacing was slow because we had to have a demo reel throwaway to grind things to a halt because of the episode theme. I think. It's not funny, the production is below Nickelodeon and Disney's sitcom quality, and it set up the biggest problem I have with the review overall that I will have to reiterate here shortly. Then we go to the next 4 minutes of nothing but jokes and not a single insightful comment or actual critique about the film thus far. Sure, he introduced our main animated lead and the villain, but the way he covered everything in those 4 minutes until our next point of contention was so fast. It's like he couldn't be arsed to talk about the animated portion's world building and how the human body was set up like a city. It's like he's trying to tell the audience to ignore all that and instead focus on the sensationalist galaxy brain take he's about to make.
But the mayor can't risk him getting sick, so he uses his manual override.
On second thought. On second thought.
Why does that sound familiar?
Because someone VCR'd my beta!
Hey, look, just because they use a control panel to shift his thoughts
while looking through a circular screen of vision
doesn't mean we stole anything.
You know, you're right. In fact, I smell a spin-off with you and another original Disney classic. I call it Kimba the White Lion.
That never went to court. We're mostly on the clear on that one.
Can I just say your movie sucks, already debunked the Kimba drama, and just focus on the bullshit Inside Out comparison? No? Fine. It'll be linked in the description, but if anybody tries to judge out the claim that The Lion King ripped off Kimba the White Lion, I ask that you please direct yourself to this video and watch all 2.5 hours of it and get that thought out of your head. The drama and discourse surrounding this topic has been so dishonest and cherry-picked to make a martyr of Kimba the White Lion at the hands of Disney's evil plagiarism that Adam had to take it upon himself to research and put together the most thorough retrospective of Kimba, and I hereby declare him the de facto and ultimate authority on this topic. And yes, Doug Walker is one of the worst offenders at keeping the lie perpetuated around the internet, so stop crediting him as being reputable about it. Back to the main issue here, this is another example of cherry-picking the movie to hold on to the claim of Osmosis Jones being a predecessor to Inside Out. It is coincidental that the mayor's control panel and view window are similar to the ones found in the Emotions headquarters, but the key difference is that the Emotions control panel is always active, always accessible, and continuously contributes to the plot. The mayor has to manually activate the control panel, and he only does so as deemed necessary. Besides that, neither film was the first nor most recent piece of media to do this, so quit the galaxy brain take. You're not clever, Doug. As you guys have seen so far, this is what I meant by the inside-out comparisons are a big problem, but they're not the only problem, and yeah, it's possible to have both at once. Take Sonic Forces, for example. The game's biggest problem for me is the absolute lack of cohesion and focus, but it's not the only problem. The level design, the characters, the story, the controls, and the lane difficulty are all problems I have with it, and yeah, they do factor into the lack of cohesion to make it that much worse. Up to this point, you guys have seen me rail on additional problems with this review, but the inside-out comparisons have taken the cake, eaten it, and turned it into an overused meme.
So here's a fun drinking game. Take a shot every single time there's a cop movie cliche. I know what you're thinking, come on, it's a cop movie. Of course there's gonna be some cop cliches, but let's just try the next 3 minutes. 3 minutes, let's count how many cop cliches there are. Quirky cop that doesn't fit in. Ooh, the angry commissioner. Oh, how about cracking one-liners against authority? Being assigned a new partner. Really? Saying he doesn't need a new partner. Hits on a hot romantic lead whose personality is invisible. Crying. She doesn't like him, thinking independence makes up for the fact that she's totally forgettable. All right, that's 7 shots! 7 shots in the past 3 minutes, what the fuck? You're as original as a computer-generated direct-to-DVD movie! God, I hope I didn't fuck with my mind too much.
Are we in Gary Busey's head?
You guys might remember in my response to his Powerpuff Girls movie review that I used this sketch to illustrate my counter-argument regarding his hypocrisy on pacing. Well, I've got 2 more things to tear a new one about it, starting with the production values of the demo reel-styled sketches. It's been said multiple times that the production values of sketches in Nostalgia Critic aren't that high to begin with, and the fact that they only have a slight step up in presentation after the revival is especially egregious. Prior to the mid-2010s, the sketches had to be done with literally whatever Doug and a few of his buddies had at their disposal, so it was at least forgivable. After the crew expanded and they could get more resources and space, not to mention that they got double the initial asking amount from fan donations and contributions on Indiegogo for one project, you'd think they'd step up the production a bit better, but you'd be wrong. Clipless reviews where these demo reel-styled sketches make up the bulk of the content are the most blatant display of just over middle school skill level, though the inside-out sketches here will do. First is the green screen effects. These effects never come close to looking integrated, nor does the composition look passable enough to ignore. In this scene, the characters are supposed to be underwater, but you can tell that the crew is just standing in place, and Tamara standing on her tiptoes as Joy is really noticeable. The worst of this effect comes from Tamara as disgust. In the green screen room, she's just standing there, completely upright and stiff as a board, and in no way attempting to fudge it to match underwater physics. Tamara's brother, who played Fear, the guy who played Ozzy, and Malcolm as Anger at least tried to fudge the underwater illusion by mimicking swimming, even though they're still standing in place. Don't the Channel Awesome crew have the studio space or funds to get stage wires or something? Then when it gets compiled in editing, and I know it's tricky to do this perfectly, but the floating speed is nowhere near convincing enough to sell the characters floating around in a room flooded with whiskey. It's just not good to look at. Other issues I have with the sketches is that Malcolm is obviously taller than Tamara, so he had to be chroma keyed in to appear shorter than the others for Anger. I really don't like Tamara's performance as Sadness. She sounds more like a female Big the Cat. Sorry. And since it wouldn't be one of my responses to NC without a petty point, whoever draws up 2D assets for the videos is not a good artist. Things have a tendency to look obviously traced or like it was drawn trying to imitate the anti-acid art style while also trying to pass as the early Family Guy style. You know, on top of poor integration. As for the cop cliches he made this sketch about, I don't exactly like when a cliche plays out in textbook fashion, but I can give the film a pass because of how the animated universe was designed. Trying to design an otherworldly set always runs the risk of alienating the audience by having to establish its own set of rules and needing an everyman to receive exposition. However, since the film goes with the approach of designing the human anatomy as a city and making the organ systems into fitting analogs based on their function, I can excuse the immune system playing cop cliches straight because, as I alluded to earlier, your immune system is basically your body's military and law enforcement. For some specifics that I'll touch upon a little later, Ozzy isn't exactly a well-respected member of the Force. His overzealousness makes him prone to fuck-ups and opens him up to the precinct laughing him out of a room. Similarly, the Chief has next to no patience with him for disobeying orders to prove himself and jumps at the opportunity to pair Ozzy up with an incoming special unit just to keep him in line. Ozzy and Leah don't exactly have the best romantic chemistry, but at the very least you can get the idea that they have some level of history with their occupations being tied directly or indirectly to political office. They had to have met at some point when Jones was initiated to the Force, right? So, no, the cop cliches aren't as aggravating as they're made out to be. They could surely be a lot worse. We then get treated to a recap of Drix's introduction, the crash site, and Doug wrongly crediting the voice of the witness to Chris Tucker instead of Carlos Alazraqui, the voice of Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life, Mr. Crocker from Fairly Odd Parents, and Grandpappy Rivera from El Tigre before, well, take a look for yourself.
Of course, what he is talking about is Thrax, who's apparently trying to take over his infectious competition.
Oh, baby, this ain't about no hustle. This is about the baddest illness any of y'all have ever seen.
Jesus Christ! Oh! Okay, this is always something that's bothered me. How come when you change the color of blood, it suddenly doesn't make it gory? Why is this a hard R, but if you suddenly change the color, oh, it's a Jello birthday party! Friday the 13th would be a G movie if the blood had fucking polka dots on it!
You, somehow, simultaneously, used both the correct formula and still got it wrong, and the incorrect formula and obviously got it wrong. Let's start with aesthetics that mean the return of the apples and oranges comparison. Monsters, aliens, and other non-human, non-animal creatures will usually be designed with blood and bodily fluids that are different in composition and color, though real-life references do go into making things more aesthetically and conceptually sound. Why do you think the robots in Samurai Jack use oil as their version of blood? Or Frybo being designed with ketchup and mustard as blood? The cells and germs are obviously going to have cytoplasm because of their build. It all comes down to design. Changing the color of blood for humans and animals doesn't work for nerfing a rating because the dissonance is too jarring and not believable because of how real life works. And changing the color of blood to nerf a rating doesn't always work because the blood and fluids are still present or are only a single component in a hurricane of gritty tropes. In Jack 2, you could make an argument that metalheads drop dark eco pickups as their blood and bodily fluids, but the bulk of that T rating the game gets comes from the violence level, swearing, alcohol and smoking references, raunchy humor, and dark concepts like torture and a corrupt government. Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic Unleashed also feature enemy death animations and a cutscene, respectively, where blood is shed on screen, giving them an element that warrants a rating of E10+. The rub, though, is the blood comes from the Black Arms aliens and the literal planetary god of darkness, Darth Gaia, both being designed with very alien and non-human and non-animal elements, so of course the blood is not going to be red in either case. Homestuck, the only piece of mania that could possibly legitimize Doug's point, isn't going to help here either. You have characters between human and total alien with multicolored blood that spills everywhere as they are mangled and slaughtered throughout the entire run, and it still earns every last bit of an R film or endgame rating. And even then, nerfing a rating ironically comes in the form of removing any sign of carnage. You're not going to see any wounds on the Crimson Guards or citizens of Haven City in Jack 2. The gun agents just pathetically dropped to the ground. Maria Robotnik and Sonic were both killed on screen in Shadow and 06 respectively, but you don't see the wounds at all. And Final Fantasy 7 takes the cake when Sephiroth literally stabs Aerith with a katana through her chest and not a single drop of blood appears throughout the entire cutscene and afterward. So get the hell out of here with the idea that merely changing the blood color makes things less gory. As a side note, I just want to mention that Osmosis Jones was originally aiming for a PG-13 rating with better navigation of more adult topics on society, the addition of swearing, and yes, much, much more violence.
Let's see. What do we have in the appendix of what makes idiots laugh? Snot looks good.
What's that over there?
It's funny because you're stupid.
That's a lot coming from someone who gave Ren and Stimpy a glowing review. I have no defense for the live-action bits. They're legitimately terrible, if not just boring, but the animated characters don't go to the nose as just an excuse for snot jokes. They go there because it's relevant to the plot, Drix's order of operations as per his work program, and they just happen to come across Thrax's dirty work in the process.
So Thrax blows up the dam, getting all the snot out, but really for no good reason, Drix decides he still wants to partner up with Jones.
Why don't we find you another, more capable officer to work with?
Sir, if it's all the same to you...
And because the piano music is signaling me to do so...
I think I'll stay with Jones.
Suit yourself.
Actually, Drix did have a good reason for wanting to stick with Jones. While he was quick to blame Ozzy for starting the incident and the two even getting an argument over it, Ozzy was literally the only other person on scene that could have possibly seen anything while Drix was trying to repair the dam. Add on to that the mayor mentioned Ozzy had a record, and of course he'd be curious to know what's going on and give him the benefit of a doubt. The commentary actually goes right into what happened, and well, Doug, for once, you're not entirely wrong. In earlier drafts of the story, Ozzy's tragic backstory was that during a family reunion when he was a kid, Frank went in for blood work, most likely a blood drive, and the entire Jones family except Osmosis was drawn out, and the guy has been on his own ever since, really adding to him being a loner. The history in the final draft, however, may not be as heavy, but you do sympathize with the character. I'm just bothered by how Doug covers it, no shock. He doesn't even cover the inner workings of how Frank's reputation fell from grace by unintentionally puking all over the teacher. It should go without saying that eating raw shellfish is a bad idea and puts you on the nominee list for a Darwin Award, especially at an event like a school science fair. It's implied that Osmosis was the only officer that was in the general district that could take action if it called for it, and wouldn't you know it, he actually saw a bacterium that could absolutely wreak havoc on Frank's health. With no other option, he forced an immune response to prevent it from going further, and in the fallout, he got suspended for unnecessary force and subsequently put on out-of-the-way patrols. So, yeah, Doug's assessment that Ozzy was supposed to keep Frank healthy during the science fair is correct, just not in the way he's letting on. That's another point of comparison Doug could have brought up and reevaluated his statements on Osmosis Jones and Inside Out. Both Osmosis and Joy, through good intentions, ended up kickstarting the plot either before the film began or within the first act, and their fuck-ups caused the person they are inhabitants of to take a hit to some part of their health. The thing is that the circumstances and the character goals are hardly comparable, even though they do care about their humans. Ozzy's character arc primarily focuses on his efforts to fix his reputation and keep doing the right thing to help keep Frank healthy, even if his methods require going outside the box and potentially land him in even more trouble than he needs. He feels a strong sense of purpose in his job as a cop, even as the city is deteriorating from Frank's bad habits that have been implied to have started even before the science fair incident. This was further explored in some episodes of the cartoon spin-off, but there were even times that Ozzy was not proud to do some of the things he does to keep Frank, or series newcomer Hector, healthy. Joy's character arc focuses on her learning that happiness isn't always the right response to things that happen in Riley's life, and that the other emotions need to properly manifest to keep things balanced. She tried so hard to keep sadness from doing her job and interfered with fear, disgust, and anger doing their thing that it affected Riley's emotional state, and to properly fix what she started, Joy had to let sadness have room to be the one at the control panel and handle a good, long, and honest expression of how moving has affected their person. And in this character growth, Joy also learns that the moments she helms can only happen and be as strong as they are, only with the others can create experiences that contrast them. These are the kinds of character analyses we don't get from Nostalgia Critic, or if we do, they tend to be the Deadpool versus Rick Sanchez comparison from the Deadpool 2 review. In case you haven't picked up on it by now, one of the things that turned me off this show was the absolute lack of nuance in analysis. Let's see here. Unfunny recap of the unfunny restaurant scene. It deadass grossed me out in the source material, by the way. Over-the-top criticism of a cockfight pun.
Back into this fat beat, bass pushing through my backseat.
Oh no!
What is it? He's having a dumb attack!
Your movie was so stupid that it overloaded his brain with idiocy.
I'm sorry, most Chris Rock movies do that!
There's only one way to stop it!
We have to show him something even more painful and idiotic!
Like what?
Whew. Boy, was that ad bad. Whew. Unless it was a charity ad, in which case, here's where you send the hate mail.
How do you function?
Aside from the overacted sketch, if you want to talk about puns and pop culture references, you could have done that. The biological cityscape in Osmosis Jones is bound to have some puns to it that also combine pop culture references where the cleverness depends on the person, but for the most part, they tend to be sound conceptually, even if they can, by and large, be considered dad jokes. Earlier in the movie, you could see a billboard with the slogan, "Peace in the Middle Ear." A pun that works because the middle ear is an actual portion of the ear structure, and we can reasonably accept that Frank is old enough to know about everything surrounding the peace in the Middle East political issue, either by history classes, or because the film came out in 2001, by coverage of the Gulf War in the 1990s. Compare that to the likes of how Shark Tale does pop culture references and puns. Puns mostly come down to replacing one word with a similar sounding or spelled name of a fish, like Muscle Crow for Russell Crowe or Coral Cola for Coca-Cola. Pop culture references like don't work because of the discrepancy between the target audience and the rating of the source material, as well as the subtlety of a train wreck. Okay, moving on from puns, get ready for some rapid-fire defenses in what follows.
After blow ninja blow, Jones sneaks in and discovers the disease is planning to kill off Frank. But sadly, he also lets him get away.
They didn't let Thrax get away. For all they know, the explosion took him and his mooks out without a hitch, and Thrax hid well enough to sell that notion. Amazing how much dramatic irony becomes a tool for the third act.
Your painful buddy cop movie tropes, sir.
Why, thank you, Garçon. I think I'll start with the cop getting fired cliche.
You're fired.
Combining this with your no variations quip, in comparison to what existing buddy cop films where this happens, good sir?
Followed by the nobody believes him when he's telling the truth cliche.
Without Jones, Frank could have been in mortal danger. You'd love to prove that, wouldn't you, Mr. Drixenall?
After Jones was demoted and we found out why he had a record, why the fuck would the mayor even start believing him now of all times? If anything, the mayor thought he was absolutely proven right yet again about Jones being a troublemaker and a trigger-happy hothead.
And for dessert, how about the finding out something that was important it turns out was all a lie cliche?
You're nothing but a wannabe, a placebo, over-the-counter, useless.
This comes across as Doug pulling a reason out of his ass, so I'll try to elucidate it as best I can. Drix already knows he's supposed to be on a strict schedule for doing his line of work, as an earlier scene demonstrated.
What are we wasting time here for? Do I have to remind you that I am on a strict 12-hour time-release program? First the throat, then the nose, then the aches and pains.
Yeah, I got it. Real important stuff.
But he still decided to stick with Ozzy on the case and in the process overstepping his visa's time window. The mayor already has plans in the works that he thinks these two are screwing up, so he uses this to get Drix back in line, revoke any power that he had, and have him effectively deported and fully relieved of duty.
Of course, the big question in all of this is, if Drix was a placebo the whole time, how did he physically stop all the symptoms? Wouldn't it have been more clever if he used, like, a psychological approach, like talking the symptoms out of continuing to affect? That way he'd be much more of an opposite to Chris Rock's character as well? Wouldn't that have been more funny and made more sense? Well, as you quickly notice, psychological intelligence is not this film's strong point.
Ah, yes, the placebo argument. The one nobody asked for but got anyway because of overanalysis, and the irony is not lost on me. In the world of medicine, a placebo refers to any substance that has clinically and chemically been assessed as completely useless and void of any therapeutic value. These are usually remedies, quote-unquote, like sugar pills that contain no actual medicine, saline injections, or even sham surgeries. The placebo effect, which is geniusly and very subtly, might I add, referenced here,
I've known sugar pills who've cured cancer, just because they believed they could.
Is a psychological phenomenon when someone uses these phony cures and against all odds gains a beneficial outcome from the sheer freaking will of the thought that it just might help. Over-the-counter medicines that you can just pick up off a store shelf could arguably be considered as such, but the package and drug facts typically and explicitly state the actual active ingredient and what it does. Tylenol cold pills contain acetaminophen, which is a pain reliever and fever reducer as the main ingredient, though other active ingredients are present in fixed and carefully formulated amounts to target sinus congestion, chest congestion, and coughing. From what we've seen of Drix's abilities and even mentions, we know at least 2 of his active components.
First the throat, then the nose, then the aches and pains.
Yeah, I got it. Hey, this ain't no time to get caustic.
Don't worry about me, I'm 1/8 Dramamine. It's just this darn heat.
Doug is taking this insult that the mayor lobbed at Drix literally, which not only doesn't work for the reasons described, but going back to the throat when Drix started his operations, the inflammation was portrayed as, I don't know, a wildfire or a brush fire on the side of the highway that had gotten out of control. Last I checked, you can't talk a wildfire into stopping, you absolute dumbass! Go try that in Wyoming or Colorado during the summer and let me know how well that turns out for ya.
Maybe if you and Mom took better care of yourselves, maybe you should still be here.
Hey. Your mom died because she got sick.
Wow. I mean, Bill, I love you. I think you were robbed at the Oscars by Sean Penn, but that was an acting wasteland that you just gave us. Who talks to their kid about their dead wife while eating a fucking Cheeto? Was that in the script? Was the Cheeto essential to the heartbreaking moment that the music suggests we're supposed to have? Would Lion King work as well if Simba was munching on snacks the whole time? Dad! Dad, come on! We gotta go home! Dad!
Yeah, the live-action portions completely fumble the ball on emotional moments, and this scene in particular absolutely blows. However, this seems surprisingly in character for Frank, given how much we've seen of his habits and what's going on inside his mind. Not once has the guy considered taking his daughter's advice and making strides to better his own health courtesy of Mayor Fleming, so the nonchalant comment about how his wife passed on from getting sick is fitting and uncomfortably so. Also, stop trying to play English literature teacher or student looking for why that circus peanut is so allegedly crucial to the scene, especially because you said nothing of the sort at the start of the movie when Frank was salting a boiled egg as he mentioned his wife was no longer with him. I'd also like to add that the Lion King what if you gave is nowhere remotely comparable because the total cohesion in the source material is too strong to imagine such a scenario. If you wanted a better comparison in the ballpark, Frank's nonchalant comment while he ate a circus peanut is more like what would happen if the gargoyles were present and cracking one-liners when Quasimodo witnesses Esmeralda give Phoebus a kiss. Hey, if Doug can pull examples out of his ass, so can I.
So while one partner gives up on himself, resulting in our hero walking around moping, just before he gives the pep talk to get his partner back, Boy, they're shitting out these cliches faster than I can say them.
This is just a nitpick, but your editing doesn't match your claims, so no, the movie isn't crapping out cliches faster than you can say them.
He goes to watch some dreams, which in this world is similar to movies. Wait a minute, that's
as painfully obvious as it gets!
I don't know, guys, he's got a point on that one.
They have it on posters and everything. Well, maybe we just put it in our subconscious.
Which we represent, by the way, as a dark gray scary abyss.
Oh, you mean this subconscious that's represented as a dark gray scary abyss?
Do I need to go back to what I've already said over and over by this point? Stop claiming these two movies are equivalent based on two coincidentally shared ideas! And Osmosis Jones and Inside Out weren't the first, nor the most recent piece of media to portray dreams as movies. Just ask Calvin and Hobbes, a beloved comic strip that ran from 1985 to 1995 before Osmosis Jones even entered the conceptual stage of development. Going a step further, Frank's subconscious stores all the bad memories and nightmares are spliced together there, and it's all portrayed as one unit. Riley's subconscious just stores everything that spooks her as literal things that go bump in the night and are under strict confinement. Hell, if you want to look at the layout of these dungeons, Thrax more or less stumbled into a room in the entire building that takes cues from the Goblin King's castle with its trippy physics. Riley's subconscious is more of a cave type of dungeon that you have to go well away from the Dream Studio to access, stuffed to the brim with monsters. These comparisons are like taking Sonic the Hedgehog and Mega Man and claiming they are similar because they share a blue protagonist and a villain who's a robotics master with a bushy mustache, even though the gameplay between the two is nowhere near similar at all. Oh, wait! You people see why I don't consider Doug a reputable critic on any form of media, and why a lot of his reviews on things I've had a personal history with really piss me off?
Leia discovers Thrax's plan to kill Frank and... Okay, is her dress shrinking or just afraid of the floor? Because that's her ass! No, that's her ass! There is no way those lines can be mistaken for anything else! I don't know who on the animation staff wants to fuck a blood cell, but even horny women from clubs are looking at that like...
Girl, you're wearing a strip of purple Scotch tape right now.
To the horny gulag with you. So, instead of using his time wisely and commenting on the chase scene and how Fleming is struggling and deliberately trying to ignore the absolute catastrophe he allowed to happen, Doug just keeps making jokes about events on the live-action side. Hey, dude, I know the live-action segments and Total Whiplash keep neutering the impact of dramatic moments, but could you make even a half-baked attempt to make a serious critique?
Take a shot into his daughter's eye where they have the final battle.
When I take down Frank's pretty little girl.
She ain't going down. You are.
She's not going down. You're going down on her! I probably should have rephrased that, but honestly, it's not as bad as anything else said in this movie. FBI, open up!
Walker, you are such a fucking creep!
My God, pull yourself together.
Okay, alright. Cool down, Magma. You guys know exactly why this joke was disgusting. I should not have to tell you why this joke was disgusting. If you don't think that the joke was disgusting, or if you follow his logic that there were worse ones in the film itself, there is something wrong with you. And looking back to the Kidney Rock sequence, perhaps I should count my blessings that Doug doesn't do his research. I bring this up because if you guys know the song that was playing, Cool Daddy Cool is absolutely not a child-friendly song, and a point toward why this film should have gone for the PG-13 rating it was initially going for. Specifically, the following lyric.
Young ladies, I like them underage. See, some say that's statutory, but I say it's mandatory.
Had Doug had done his research, I can bet my left ovary that either we would have gotten a disgusting joke in that camp sooner, or he would have used those lyrics to justify this one. And considering this is a man who was in his 30s when this review was made, and one of his former producers was found to be a sexual offender, the shock humor also gets a heaping dose of tone deafness. It's just about over. I can get through this.
The eyelash falls off, killing the disease. Jones returns with the cure, and Dr. Ben Affleck seems to have brought Frank back to life.
Mama says hi.
Oh, wait, can I try that emotional moment again? I clearly should have been eating a pork rind or something.
That's stupid! You're stupid! Stop being stupid!
So the day is saved, Jones and Drix are back on the force, and Frank goes on a beautiful hike with his daughter. What's the most heartwarming way to end this all? A fart.
Dad.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Things actually were heartwarming up to that point. And the fart was more just laser-guided karma. After Fleming had been so thoroughly rotten to Osmosis and Drix and nearly gotten Frank killed by letting the events that would allow Thrax to do his thing happen, getting impeached was cathartic enough. Getting ejected out of the city by his own actions was just the icing on the cake. If you'll allow me.
Get what you fucking deserve!
Dad.
Well, at the very least you can say this film represented the turd very well.
Boo!
The sad thing is there are some clever ideas in this movie. I mean, the designs are great, the environment itself is pretty cool, and sometimes even some of the puns are kind of clever. The animation as well is so gorgeous to look at. It's just so colorful and flowing.
Okay, but you never once made your case for any of that during the review itself. You can't just say the movie had great designs, ideas, and even puns if you couldn't be bothered to give such examples in the first place. This smacks of the same energy from your Sailor Moon review where you said throughout the main review that Usagi, Serena in the Deep Dub, didn't have a personality, but in your closing summary you say she did have a personality and provided no evidence to support your claim. To steal the catchphrase of a certain deer of teal color, citation needed. This isn't even something my professors taught me in college. This is something most people are taught in middle school. If you make a claim or an argument, back it up with actual evidence, or you're just pulling it out of your ass.
But the story is every boring buddy cop flick, the live action stuff is awkwardly done, and a lot of the humor just isn't that funny. I admire this film a lot more for its creativity, but in terms of a good comedy or action film, they both fall pretty ill.
Again, in comparison to which other films that go the buddy cop route. Also, this is why reviewers will bring up development history of their topic in their review, a concept I'm pretty certain Doug is allergic to. I too admire this movie more for the concept and creativity about what goes on in the human body, and this was even carried over to the cartoon spin-off that started airing a year after this movie came out. Most people's nostalgia comes from the animated segments with how well crafted they are, and the fact that this film is guaranteed to be played once a year in a school health class or science class. I know I was one of them. We actually did a question packet in tandem with it in my sophomore year of high school, even though I saw this movie for the first time as a younger kid when it was sort of new and available for Cartoon Network to air. The development history of this movie is just as fascinating, and not once did Doug even mention it. There was so much about this movie that could have been discussed by Doug, and he just blows it off to make jokes that aren't funny, sketches that try to get you to accept his demo reel leftovers that no one wants in the same way Sega keeps shoving Zanuck down people's throats, and comparisons to another movie founded entirely on two similarities and nothing else, and expecting you to take it as evidence they have the same premise. And so it finally ends with a sketch that goes to show how much of a galaxy brain take Doug thinks he's made.
But who knows, maybe somebody saw these creative choices and was inspired by it years later.
Yeah, inspired to rip it off.
Okay, clearly we stole some things from you.
Thank you.
Some of those things couldn't have been just a coincidence.
Thank you.
But we did something with them. Something smart, something meaningful, something that can change and help lives.
And all your movie did was help people lose their faith in David Hyde Pierce.
I'm a nostalgia critic, I remember it. Even when we don't want to admit it.
Hey, oh, was Lethal Weapon 4?
You cannot claim Inside Out ripped off Osmosis Jones based on two coincidental similarities. You cannot claim Inside Out is the better movie about the human body as a whole when its specialty is psychology and not physiology. And you cannot claim Inside Out saw Osmosis Jones and said, "Hold my Slurpee," when not once in that film's own development history was Osmosis mentioned in its list of inspirations. You do neither film any favors doing so. With all due respect, fuck you. This is the longest review of a Nostalgia Critic episode I've made, and for good reason. There is just so much that is fundamentally wrong with this episode that my initial viewing when it first dropped only registered the tip of the iceberg. Everyone was making the Osmosis Inside Out comparison when Inside Out was announced, but they didn't base their entire reviews around it because these two movies are entirely different entities that wanted to accomplish different things. Technically, Inside Out is the better movie in the script writing, humor, story, and feels department, and having the better animation if only the CGI is accounted for is no contest due to Pixar's experience, but not on the metric that it wanted to take Osmosis Jones and start over. I just don't get how anyone would watch each one at least once, back to back, and come to the conclusion of, wow, this 2001 buddy cop movie about medicine and human anatomy sure got beat at its own game by a 2015 coming-of-age adventure movie about psychology. It's an apples and oranges comparison so riddled with misinformation and deliberate bad faith proofs that really makes me wonder if Doug really even watched both movies before making this review. Yes, actually watched both movies and allowed them to sink in, not a one-and-done view to get the script for the video and sketches farted out. The green screen in the demo reel sketches isn't as bad as the effects from his Dragon Ball Evolution or Alvin and the Chipmunks reviews, but they're not pleasant to watch, they're not funny, there are even errors with the costume design. There were a lot of segments that were just breezed over with no actual critiques or discussion to be had, and the ones that did get a dedicated discussion were just so disingenuous and missed the point that any newcomer to either film would leave more confused than when they found this video. And the comedy just does not land. It didn't land even once, either because the jokes were too drawn out, came across as hypocritical, or were so disgusting, and the behind-the-scenes drama that resulted in the Change the Channel movement makes them even worse. And the final kick in the teeth about all of this is it was done at fan request, which if anyone familiar with Doug's track record on things people born in the 90s and 2000s grew up with, you should have seen how this was going to turn out. Doug holds no nostalgia for the 90s and 2000s and holds a level of animosity and hate for the former, so stop asking him to review things like Sonic the Hedgehog, Nickelodeon's Golden Age lineup, Cartoon Network's Golden and Silver Age lineup, Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Disney Channel Silver and Bronze Age lineup, or any other movies or shows that were a cultural phenomenon from that era or even gained a cult following. You're not going to get an honest look at them from Doug, let alone a positive one, so save your energy and don't bother. If this episode were a presentation for a class, it would get an F from me because of how poorly it was presented and showcased points when it made any. If you guys want an actual Osmosis Jones review, go watch Rebel Taxi. It barely hits 8 minutes, but it covers the movie and the show with enough important information, and Pan backs up his points with solid evidence. If you want the Nostalgia Critic formula, go watch Josh Scorcher. He's got the format down pat and has improved the formula to near perfection that Doug wouldn't even dare strive for, and Josh actually has his ego in check and dealt with any behind-the-scenes drama with tact and professionalism. If you want a good and informative review on any show or movie, go to literally any other user on the platform. And if this episode wants to be put in its rightful place, it can go right in the trash to be processed as a biohazard. Thank you for tuning into this review, and for the love of God, stop defending this guy and his company. It's not a hill worth dying on anymore.
This cat was sick before I even got here.